Welcome to tonight's special report on the Truth and Reconciliation process. In tonight's program, we report on the Vlakplaas policeman's application for amnesty in Cape Town and the special hearings of the faith communities in East London. We also take a look at tomorrow's hearing on the controversial Mandela United Football Club and Justice Minister DULLAH OMAR's statements on Winnie Mandela. But we start our program in Cape Town. Last year, the Truth Commission held two special hearings into the killings of an ANC cell in Cape Town known as the Gugulethu Seven. A number of former security policemen from Cape Town gave evidence then. But the most dramatic revelation was the involvement of policemen from the security police death squad at Vlakplaas outside Pretoria. This week, the Vlakplaas men applied for amnesty for the killing of the Gugulethu Seven.
In 1986, the security police were notching up so-called anti-terrorism successes all over the country. But in the Western Cape, their record was poor, and this man, Captain Rian Bellingen, was dispatched from the Special Counter-Terrorism Unit at Vlakplaas to help Cape Town security police improve their intelligence gathering network and their counter-terrorism strategies.
Die Kaapstad veiligheidspolisie het nie inligting op die tafel gehad nie. Hulle het adresse gehad, daar was nie 'n stukkie inligting in Vlakplaas het Kaapstad op die kaart gesit nie.
He was accompanied to Cape Town by this Vlakplaas colleague, Constable Tapelo Mbello, and two Askaris. Shortly after their arrival in Cape Town, their first high-profile operation in collaboration with Cape Town security police took place, the killing of the Gugulethu Seven. This week, they applied for amnesty for those killings. There are different versions of what happened there that day. The police say they wanted to arrest the cadres, but that things went wrong and they had to shoot them in self-defense. The family says the cadres were ambushed and executed. We are here now with the Amnesty Committee of the Truth Commission to try and figure out what happened that day. Because the problem facing the Truth Commission is that they have to make sense of conflicting versions coming from different policemen.
While I was running in the direction of the crossing, I came near a combi, and one of the so-called people identified by the Askaris, these freedom fighters, it seemed as if he was throwing a hand grenade in my direction, and then I shot him from near, and he fell down. What precisely happened there, I can't remember. At that stage, I thought my life was in danger. It's a bit awkward, but just give us the details. When you shot this man, what did you see? Where did you shoot him? I shot him on the side of his head. That is what I gathered from the inquest. There was blood spouting out on the tar road, and there was a lot of blood coming from his head.
He shot twice. He first dragged him out, then he shot him.
Mr. Chairman, I deny. I did not drag him from the vehicle. I deny his allegations.
A man approached us raising his arms, and he was talking in Xhosa, saying that he'll take us to where the rest of the group is. One sergeant from the riot unit, he was a white sergeant, said, I should shoot this man. And before I shot this man, as he was raising his arms, I saw his firearm, and therefore we disarmed him. The white sergeant, I told him that this man was going to take us to where the rest of the team is, but he just said, I must shoot him. I shot him whilst he was lying on his back. I shot him in the head. Thereafter, this sergeant told me that I shoot shit, and he shot him in his stomach with the R1 rifle while still lying on his back.
Could you please show us his arms? The applicant stood up holding his arms raised in the manner traditionally assumed when wishing to surrender, the hands up position.
And is it correct that that this person who approached you at no time attempted to shoot you?
He never tried to shoot us or even to reach for his firearm.
But beyond the gruesome admissions to the fatal shots that each fired, Bellingen and Mbello's testimonies differ dramatically as to the wider circumstances.
I knew that it would be impossible to arrest armed men. I knew that these men were going to shoot. Because the words that were used there is that they should be eliminated.
What other words were used?
To be taken out.
What other words were used?
To be swept.
They had to be swept.
Sweep. Now, according to your knowledge, what do these words mean?
It means killing.
Mbello at times contradicted Bellingen's version that the shooting took place only when the plans to arrest went wrong and the police came under threat. He seemed to confirm the allegation that a deliberate ambush had been laid with a clear aim of killing the ANC cell.
So is it correct then that your mission clearly was that you should go out there and that you should kill the freedom fighters?
According to the situation, yes, it was so.
Bearing in mind what is, in our opinion, or in the opinion of the families, a poor attempt to arrest these individuals, and bearing in mind that in the opinion of the families, you had set out to counter-ambush these individuals, it would appear that you in fact succeeded in doing so. What do you say about that?
After we set up the original ambush for them, we then withdrew from the operation. Thereafter, they shot at us first, they attacked us. And we were simply just a lot more successful in actually countering this attack. That's the way I see it.
That's one perspective. The other perspective is that these individuals were simply unaware of the fact that you were going to launch this attack on them. What do you say about that?
I can't comment on that.
Bellingen admitted under cross-examination that he could have given the order to shoot to kill, but denied that it was a carefully planned ambush. He says the Gugulethu operation was the kind of operation that the police would carry out to preempt a bank robbery.
My personal feeling was almost that it was a situation similar to having to foil a bank robbery. If you know that the people are armed, and the situation in the Black Townships was ungovernable at the time, I was of the opinion that this was not going to be a Sunday school picnic and that we would be shot at and we would not allow a single policeman to be killed that morning. So I might have said to my juniors, look, we are going to actually shoot them dead if they should raise their weapons and aim it at us, because I didn't want to have a sort of a Trojan horse situation to the detriment of innocent people. We would have shot them dead. And this group consisted of about 20 policemen, people with counterinsurgency training. That's correct. And I approached people who had fought in the Rhodesian Bush War and perhaps also in Namibia, and who'd been in a task force there. I didn't go there with a group of administrative staff. I used people who had experience of thinking on their feet and people who would know how to deal with the situation on the ground.
A strange twist in the horrible tale of the Gugulethu Seven is that of a video that police were compiling for the then State President P.W. Botha. The video was designed to illustrate Cape Town's new success in counter-terrorism. Serious questions were asked about why the video crew was on standby to film the aftermath of the Gugulethu shooting if the plan was a simple operation to arrest.
The situation in Cape Town was such that the video unit was always present at scenes of unrest.
But the Commission also wanted to know about responsibility. Bellingham took responsibility for the orders he gave, although exactly what the nature of those orders were is still not clear.
You must then accept the responsibility for the deaths of all 7 individuals if your juniors in fact acted upon your instructions.
Mr. Williams is 100% correct. I, Rian Bellingham, who was a sergeant at that time, take full responsibility for everybody who cooperated with me, the Askaris, Mbelo, and also the responsibility for those seniors who today are saying there was nothing wrong, they did not know me. Today I accept full responsibility for this whole operation.
I want to put it to you, Mr. Mbelo, that you have tried to hide behind orders and circumstances to justify your conduct.
The main reason that I have come before this commission is to tell this committee as to what I know about this shooting and the part that I took, because the nation at large doesn't know about what we were doing at that time. And I have come here prepared to face the music of whatever I've done in the past.
Beyond the contradictory accounts and the spine-chilling facts, both Mbelo and Bellingham gave an insight into the emotional effects and anger they feel now about the operation then.
After what has been done to a person, for what we've gone through everything, for we've given everything for a country and a political party. We came from Christian homes, and then what happened to us afterwards when the generals and the ministers did not support us, and I decided never again will I be interested in politics again, and I'm educating my children also in that respect.
In the old apartheid regime, when they called you a very good cop, you're a cop who takes orders and execute them without asking questions, then you're a good cop.
You had obviously heard of your colleagues at Vlakplaas who were involved in killing people as well?
Yes, that came to my attention also.
How did that advance the cause?
I don't think it advanced any certain cause so far, because all what they did, they even killed their own people to silence them. So I didn't think that it advanced anything. I was not scared that I was becoming a bad cop. I was only scared that if I don't do it himself, because there was too much shooting, I could have got shot myself also. Then they could have said I was shot by one of the guerrillas on the scene.
But the worst emotional turmoil was felt by the families of the 7 Gugulethu victims. This was their third date with the truth. A real raw confrontation between Tapelo Mbelo and those who had lost loved ones did take place, but in a deserted hearing hall after the hearing was over.
Ndayazi ndizawucela ixolo, abanye bazawundixolela, abanye ngeke bandixolele. Ndayazi ndizawufa nam ndinaloo nto yokuba nyhani ke ndayenza ububi nam apha emhlabeni. Into endicelayo bengisithi abazali bonke baba laba bantwana bebephaya la mina. Ndicela uxolo ukusuka ngaphakathi kwenhliziyo yami.
Ndiva buhlungu uba ke bingumntana ebendiphangelela ke lamntana. Binguyena mntana ozemva kwentombi leya ibilila apha. Uyile kubo wababona. Kwaphakathi kuwe uyayazi loo nto uba ndizongcothoza apha. Igazeli lakho alithethi uba kanene ngabantakwethu aba. Ndithunywa ngaba bamhlophe.
Mama kwangoku siyandetha.
Ngokuyena uthi xa ithetha phaya ufostiwe makayenze yonke laa nto otherwise ebengafuna uyenza utshilo laa nto mandive kakuhle ufostiwe kuba esemthethweni wafanele uba makayenze laa nto ngoku kuyenzeka ubrother wam njengokhayeli ebulala u-Abheli ubrother wakhe. Wena sibuhlungu ngawe right enough uyayixela into yoba yayisystem enyani ke yayiyo yayiphusha at the back uba mawenze le nto and nawe ukhusela ubomi bakho njengoba usitsho. Kodwa thina sikwazi ukuxolela phofu mna icala lam kubrother wam bangayingoyena brother thina ekhaya sibayifoma ntombazana uyeyedwa inkwenkwe kodwa wena ukwazi uba mawuthengise ngayo. Andikwazi ukuxolela ngoba ntoni uthetha le uthethe le awunanyani.
Ndiyaqonda ukuthi uThapelo ndithi ngumthandazo. Intoni uThapelo ilo gama? Yabona ndiyaqonda igama lakho. Ndani noma ndizathi ulilandela noba kulilandelangani. Mna njengoba ndingumama kaChristopher nje ndiyakuxolela mntanam kuba ke ndiyaqonda uba uyintanga inye noChristopher ngumntana kum. Ndiyakuxolela mntanam kuba ke unobanga ndithi ndiyakuxolela umntana makasoba savuka soba phinda avuke akuncedi noba kusokuthiwa ndisibambile isilonda sakho ndakufana so Thixo uyondigweba ngaloo nto kuba kuthi abaxolele abasonayo njengoba nathi sibaxolela apha.
Hayi bayangena kwakunzima kuyo.
I'm willing to forgive you, my friend, but speak the truth. I'm willing to forgive you. I'm really, really willing.
This amnesty hearing will continue at a later date when the Askari who infiltrated the Gugulethu Seven cell, Jimmy Mbane, will testify. But it is interesting to note that the Cape security policemen, like Dolf Odendaal and William Liebenberg, have not applied for amnesty. One wonders if they will be prosecuted for their role in the killings. That decision would be up to the Attorney General. The Truth Commission has 16 commissioners. 2 are Afrikaners. Tonight we want to introduce you to one of them, Wynand Malan.
Jan, my oupa grootjie of oeroupa grootjie, oeroupa grootjie, het saam met die Franse hugenote uitgekom Suid-Afrika toe in 1688. So dis waar die plaaslike familie begin. My oupa het in die Anglo-Boereoorlog in Indië beland as 'n kruisgevangene. My pa het in die Tweede Wêreldoorlog in Koffiefontein beland, waar hy aangehoudene sonder verhoor was. Is geïnterneer deur Jan Smuts, wat ons in ons kleintyd gesien het as Engelandse agent. Ek is gebore terwyl hy in die kamp was. Ek was 4 maande oud toe hy uitgekom het. Ek en my ma was alleen in daai tyd. En dadelik Transvaal toe getrek. Ek het hier skool gegaan, Pretoria Universiteit. Johannesburg praktiseer as prokureur so vir 11 jaar en toe in die politiek beland.
Truth Commissioner Wynand Malan has often been the outsider. His background is a conservative Afrikaans one. He should have found a political home in the National Party. But unable to stomach the rule of P.W. Botha and his Securocrats, Malan resigned from the NP and ultimately threw in his lot with the Democratic Party.
We should also be measured against the background of the main objective, which is forging a new nation.
An intensely cerebral man and a voracious reader, Wynand Malan finds his duties as a Truth Commissioner have interfered with his more academic pursuits. But Malan doesn't see himself in a university when the TRC is through. He intends to continue working as a mediator and problem solver, facilitating reconciliation and understanding amongst diverse peoples.
Ek is vreeslik lief vir lees, waarvoor ek 'n bietjie tyd kry omdat ek min slaap en in die nagte lees ek nog. Baie lief vir filosofie, teologie, mites, alles wat te doen het met die verstaan van lewe. Ek glo baie sterk dat verskillende mense dink struktureel verskillend. Dis nie net oor die sogenaamde content of die inhoud wat mense verskil nie. Dis ook oor die manier hoe hulle goed benader. Dis amper soos mense na radio kyk, as jy op 'n sekere stasie ingestel is. Jy is nou op 5 FM, dan is daar geen manier wat jy op SAFM kan uitsaai dat die ander ou jou hoor nie. So in a sense you have to key into the frequency of the listener and then communicate in that language. Daar's baie daar wat ek baie na en moedeloos was, juis vanweë die feit dat dit 'n projek was met geen voorbereiding nie, met min prosedures, wat ons maar probeer in die proses daar stel het, met nog 'n verskillende manier van verstaan van beide prosedures en prosesse. Dis eintlik vir my maar 'n oefening in versoening, al is dit net met my mede-kommissarisse, en ek is seker hulle almal ervaar dieselfde teenoor mekaar en ook teenoor my. Dis baie moeilik om te praat oor die doel van die proses, want ek dink soveel, ons ken die spreekwoord wat ek al in my dae op skool uit Latyn uitgeleer het, soveel hoofde, soveel sinne. Ons is 17 kommissarisse, ons kom uit verskillende uithoeke, figuurlik gesproke, 17 van hulle in hierdie land. Ons sien dinge verskillend. Dis die belangrike. Dis die eerste proses van versoening, is om vrede te kan maak met waar ons onderling vandaan kom, met mekaar te kan maak, ook met ons eie. Laat ek liewer sê, vir my bly die doel nog in basis die doel van nasionale eenheid en versoening. Nie as twee doelwitte nie, maar as een enkel begrip. Nasionale eenheid en versoening. Met mekaar, as Suid-Afrikaners, hier waar ons bevind, vorentoe te dink en te leef.
For now, the outsider has found a place very much inside the Truth Commission.
Die moeilikste, maar dis dieselfde tyd laag en hoog, is getuies wat voor ons kom verskyn. Hoofsaaklik ook die vrouens wat kom, die tannies wat vir die eerste keer hulle storie kom vertel, en wat dankbaar is vir die geleentheid dat die staat moet kennis neem. Ek wil of dat die staat kennis neem. Dit roer my, dit spreek my aan. Dis moeilik, dis swaar. Maar mens kan dit ook as 'n hoogtepunt beskryf, in terme van wat jy wil bereik. Dis vir my so geweldig simbolies van die herintegrasie, wat die wet ook van praat. Die wet praat eintlik van die herstel van menseregte in daardie idioom. Maar dit is eintlik die wakker maak van die mens self, wat homself dood bevind het. Soveel van die mense, mens kry die indruk, hulle het na die suffering, het hulle soos 'n fetus gaan lê, opgekrul, en die geleentheid om te getuig, het die nuwe geboorte gebring. En hier is ek as mens, ek kan myself hanteer, en ek kan die wêreld om my hanteer, en nou gaan ek saam met die ander vorentoe. Vir my wat bly dit maar die hoogtepunte.
After the break, the special hearing for the religious communities and Winnie Mandela and the Just War. We've had special hearings for the business sector, the legal profession, the health sector, and the media. This past week, our country's religious leaders had the opportunity to examine their past roles before the Truth Commission, and especially to look at the one thing religious leaders ought to be good at: reconciliation.
Churches must say to those who know that they have a heavy burden of guilt, confess it, speak the truth, because isn't it God who says, the truth shall make you free. The truth shall make you free. The truth not so that people must be prosecuted. The truth so that people must become free. The truth so that people must healed. As a gift of God has entrusted to us the message of reconciliation. As ons dit nie doen nie, wie gaan dit doen? As ons dit nie aanpak nie, wie gaan dit doen?
Dit is 'n teken van die bloed van Jesus Christus.
Christians of all denominations, Jews, Muslims and Hindus, asked for forgiveness as bishops, pastors, rabbis, imams and other religious leaders, one after the other, confessed their sins of the past, their passivity, even complicity, but mostly their silence over the evil system of apartheid.
As pastors, we delighted in preaching and teaching about the Good Samaritan and pointing the finger at others, while all the time we should have applied the lesson to ourselves. We, the white members of the leadership of our charismatic and Pentecostal churches, sincerely seek the forgiveness of our black counterparts within the church. Many of these black leaders tried to show us the error of our ways, but pride and often a sense of superiority blinded us. We seek the forgiveness of our colleagues within the larger religious community for the times when we lacked the courage and conviction to walk alongside you in your demands for justice and righteousness.
We took too long to come to this place of a clearer, uncompromising witness. We allowed others to precede us and take the flak. Too late, we conceded that they were right, and we owe them an apology for our compromising and often complacent half-heartedness, and sometimes for a hardness of heart that could be extremely damaging and hurtful. Archbishop, you yourself bore the brunt of this critique, not only in the nation at large, but even from the membership of your own church. May I, on behalf of the CPSA, offer to you a profound apology, ask for your forgiveness, and thank you for your extraordinary graciousness and magnanimity. In a strange way, I think many white Anglicans in the CPSA owe an apology to the Afrikaner community for their attitude of moral superiority. But our chief expression of apology must be to our own black membership, and I'm using the word black inclusively. Chairperson, our so-called white parishes, like white businesses, and I'm thinking of last week's TRC hearings, have unquestionably benefited from apartheid and its political predecessors. In their church facilities, including housing and transport for their priests, they have been bastions of relative privilege.
The exposures made by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission have filled many white people, and many of us in the Church of England in South Africa, with shock, shame and revulsion. Looking back, it is amazing that we were so naive. Be that as it may, the fact of the matter is that we allowed ourselves to be misled into accepting a social, economic and political system that was cruel and oppressive. We should have been more aware, more vocal and more insightful, but we were not. For this, we are guilty.
We have to say, in the first instance, that the Catholic Church reflected indeed the divisions of the society in which it found itself. Just as apartheid divided people according to color, so did it divide the church, our church, into a black community and a white community. There was, in effect, a black church and a white church.
The TRC is the only forum with some credibility and acceptability available to us in which we can publicly apologize to all those who had been hurt by the travesties of the past. It is the most effective way available to us, which we can use to offer help and healing to those who had committed unacceptable, oftentimes even gruesome deeds against fellow South Africans. And that offer goes for people on all sides of the line.
We were forbidden from bearing our own without the permit of the oppressor. To minister to our own people was turned either into a criminal offense or an act for which one would be labeled as schismatic from the Church Catholic. Today we wish to offer an unreserved apology to those who felt that our refusal to minister in Transkei under the stringent conditions imposed by that government was to abandon them. The wounds of that blow are still fresh for us because some of our people were permanently alienated from us as a result.
I want particularly to welcome and give thanks to the representatives and adherents of other faiths gathered here today. First, I want to thank you and those whom you represent for the sterling contribution that you have made to the struggle for justice, freedom, and democracy in this land.
In the past, so-called leaders of the Hindu community, and I emphasize so-called Hindu leaders, failed hopelessly and miserably in voicing their protest against apartheid. The few who did so passively and not actively, or for that matter, even militantly.
As far as our collaboration and resistance to the system is concerned, there is the community at large. In truth, the community at large was a complacent community, feeble in its responses, and going whichever way the wind was going at a particular moment. In 1979, Imam Abdullah Harun was murdered in detention after being kept there for 6 months. 25,000 people attended his funeral, and not a single voice in the Muslim community was raised about the nature of his death and all the injuries on his body. Not a single voice in the Muslim community from the religious leadership of the Muslim community. And this silence, Mr. Chairman, held for 7 years non-stop at a mosque level and in a Muslim publication level. Of course, I speak with anger. By God, I've got a damn right to be angry.
It's our job as religious people, if I may be bold to say so, the job of all of us to try to apply the antidotes. This TRC has become famous throughout the world because of the horror which has unfolded in the testimony so many months before you. There's no one who's listened in on the radio or who very humbly has come to sit at the back and listen to the testimony. There's no one who hasn't been moved to tears, because we've had here a record of inhumanity, of the worst things that human beings can do to other human beings. And what we need in our country is to now change, because of that, to change to the best, to display the best that human beings can do to fellow human beings. Not the hurt and the torture and the shame, but the love and the friendship and the mutual help to lift our country up.
Beautiful, beautiful far, your we are marching upwards to Zion, the beautiful city of God.
Leaders of the traditionally black churches also spoke about the many injustices their churches had suffered. Some of them also apologized for not having done more to oppose the oppressive National Party government.
Religious propaganda that emanated from the apartheid system was effective, Mr. Chairperson. It made many of our members feel guilty about any form of opposition, disobedience, or even criticism of the government policy. As a result, the church was silent when it should actually have spoken out. Because of its silence, when it should have spoken, it is guilty of collaboration with the system that caused great suffering to many innocent people.
We knew all along that hideous things were happening, and that is often why we said what we said and did what we did. And we recognize that what is being revealed by your commission will have a profound impact on future generations in the country. There are sins to be forgiven, wounds to be bound up, hatreds to be reconciled, buildings to be rebuilt, pupils to be taught, leaders to be held accountable.
Peace be unto you. I shall go thus far.
The leader of the ZCC, the Zionist Christian Church, the biggest single church in Southern Africa, made a dramatic entrance with a large entourage and scores of followers wearing their trademark silver star. But to the surprise of everyone at the hearing, Bishop Barnabas Lekhanyane refused to speak publicly. Not even Archbishop Tutu could change his mind. Instead, the ZCC submission was read by the Bishop's legal counsel.
May God bless our country. May God bless our leaders and its people. Khoso ayebelele.
The silent bishop and his delegation left immediately afterwards and would not comment on why Bishop Lekhanyane had not addressed the TRC personally.
No reason. That's just how we do things. That is our style. Okay. Road, please.
The hearing built up to the moment when the NG Kerk, the former white state church that once declared apartheid to be based on the Bible, sat down before the commission. But just before them came their former black-coloured and Indian daughter churches.
We believe that the Uniting Reformed Church, even in its existence as the former mission church and Dutch Reformed Church in Africa, did not do enough in opposing apartheid, did not do enough in speaking clearly against the evils of apartheid.
Ek wil 'n beroep doen op die NG Kerk familie. Dis die 4 apartheidskerke. Dat hulle sigbaarheid moet verleen aan die eenheid van Christus, nie vir mense nie. Dat hulle sigbaarheid moet verleen aan die eenheid van Christus, dat ons nie die volgende millennium in moet gaan as 'n verdeelde, gereformeerde, beleidende familie nie.
Then the big moment arrived. After months of infighting and debate, NG Kerk moderator Freek Swanepoel finally faced the TRC. He immediately declared that he could not speak for all the members of his church.
The movement for reconciliation is growing in our church on ground level. The church also continually and with empathy focused on the large numbers of people who were unjustly disadvantaged during the times of apartheid and to assist them in their poverty and suffering. A lack of understanding, unwillingness and disobedience among members and officials with regard to the need in the community.
On the number of applicants who come before the Amnesty Committee of the Commission to apply for amnesty, and who in their testimony to the Amnesty Committee actually blame the teachings of their church and say that they were misled by their church into believing that the things that they did were actually in the service of the interest of the gospel of Jesus Christ, that the church blessed their weapons of terror, that the church ministered to them, encouraged them.
Ons het ons mense rondom apartheid as 'n Bybelse eis
We have indeed taught our people wrongly with regard to apartheid as a biblical instruction. If you teach them that this is the way of the Bible, in fact, you instruct them how they should act. And in this regard, certainly the church has confessed that it is guilty. And we are experiencing an inner struggle to change around and turn around in this regard. When a person appears before you, applying for amnesty, it is indeed true that he can say that this gospel was taught to him in this way. Certainly, there had been different messengers sent at a later stage, but people can certainly make this claim.
I am so glad that you have seen you have seen the light, and we know we could almost say to the devil, "Watch out! Hier kom die NGK." In stark contrast, really, to what had taken place in the business sector hearings, where on the whole you found people in a self-justifying mode. Here, extraordinarily, virtually every single one of those who testified from the different faith communities and the different Christian denominations started off from the premise that they had done wrong. They confessed, and it was heartfelt, and they asked for forgiveness. And you know, that put a different slant on things and had a significant impact on the atmosphere that prevailed throughout the 3 days.
Stompie Sepe died at age 13. He was a fiery and unique young anti-apartheid fighter. In 1992, Winnie Madikizela Mandela, a fiery and unique leader of the anti-apartheid cause, was charged with abducting Sepe. Members of her personal army, the Mandela United Football Club, were convicted for this murder. Madikizela Mandela has been implicated in other disappearances. This week, their parents will ask her to explain what happened to their children. But let's listen to what Justice Minister DULLAH OMAR had to say a few days ago.
You cannot compare the alleged violations in which Mrs. Mandela has allegedly been involved with the crimes of apartheid, both in terms of quality, in terms of number, scope, scale, and the nature of those violations. There is a fundamental difference between the two. At the same time, I regard any violation of a human right as a violation per se and need to be admitted as having been wrong. On the side of the ANC, we accept that during the course of the struggle, violations of human rights were committed. Our struggle was a just struggle. The international community has regarded our struggle as a just one, justified by international law. But that did not justify violations of human rights. And we recognize that such violations are wrong. But I do not think that you can equate the violations which have taken place during the context of a just struggle with a system which was a crime against humanity itself.
Very few of us would disagree that apartheid was a crime against humanity and that the fight against it was morally and politically just. But such claims of abduction and torture and murder against an icon of the anti-apartheid struggle confront us and the Truth Commission with a thorny moral question. Can war be justified? If so, what would be a just war? And are all methods and actions acceptable when you are fighting a just war?
I don't think anybody here, the General, myself, likes war. I've met very few military people who do. War is horrific and is best avoided. But does this mean that when war cannot be avoided, that those who are involved are all equally evil or equally guilty.
Even if both sides participate in the same war, even if both sides commit similar acts of shooting, bombing, and killing, morally speaking, they cannot be equated. It's a question of a just war as against an unjust war.
There is a desire amongst parties to establish a moral equivalence between those who fought against oppression in this country and those who perpetuated oppression. I think it is absolutely crucial as we move forward in the future, into the future, that we should leave posterity with the understanding from our perspective of the morality of that struggle.
The moral paradox of war is that in war, soldiers may kill. Soldiers may kill enemy soldiers. They may intentionally, deliberately kill in combat enemy soldiers without that being being murder. Combatants may legitimately kill other combatants, but the fundamental principle of justice in war is the distinction between combatants and non-combatants. You may never, even in a just war, deliberately target a civilian, a non-combatant, a bystander.
The liberation movements, I submit, will fail heavily on this issue of the methods used in war. The whole concept of the revolutionary war is not acceptable, and it has not been passed by the international community as an acceptable form of war making. Secondly, terrorism is completely rejectable. Terrorism is a crime against humanity because it strikes at the defenseless. Thirdly, the liberation side's complete disregard for the protection of non-combatants, especially after the open decision and announcement to act indiscriminately in the use of force in the 80s. This force became intentional. It deliberately took the war fronts to the residential areas, thereby exposing the non-combatants to the ravages of war.
Against our political record and my statements that it would have been antithetical to our objective to have the intention to terrorize the civilian population and to harm them. Apartheid, on the other hand, inherently had to terrorize the majority to accept its subjugation. They had to terrorize not only South African blacks, but they had to terrorize every white who stood up to join the blacks in the democratic struggle. And they had to terrorize the whole of Southern Africa.
When we talk about a just war, as we had in South Africa, undoubtedly against a corrupt, criminal, racist regime, when we talk about a just war against it, and we invoked that, we did not give to ourselves the right to terrorize people. We did not give to ourselves the right that the ends don't justify the means. We were highly principled, and the evocation of the just war does not accept, because it would undermine the justness of the cause, that the ends justify the means. Now, I'm not saying in that there weren't certain departures, certain aberrations.
Insofar as the violations that occurred within the ANC, I can show systematic processes which attempted to address them, which acknowledged them. Not now, which acknowledged them when we were still guerrillas, and said, this is wrong.
How do we as a society begin to read now, today, begin to read allegations of abduction and murder of a 13-year-old activist from Tumaholi?
What we have to ask is, what was the purpose of that abduction, and who was, and what happened in that, during that kidnapping? Well, the fact is that this child was tortured and murdered, and that is absolutely unacceptable in moral terms. You know, individuals can't set themselves up as a tribunal to judge somebody who is allegedly a spy. We can't accept that kind of behaviour. A tribunal that is set up by a movement may be a different issue. But we're not talking about that in this situation. So to equate the affairs that occurred in a household in Soweto with a just tribunal set up by a liberation movement in a foreign country perhaps, or even inside the country, something that was actually accepted by the movement. Those two are quite different things. And I don't think that we can accept an individual like Winnie Mandela making a decision, or anybody else for that matter, making a decision about whether someone can live or die.
The role of the individual and individual morality is essential, because reconciliation and forgiveness can't be about groups and sweeping political statements. It's about the individual as well, if it's about establishing some kind of morality. Given that, it's also important, if we understand it in that context, that we must see that individuals had choices. Whether they were easy or difficult choices is another matter, but individuals have choices. And unless we bring it down to the level of the individual, then we take away that important aspect of it. So in every action, I do believe that one must look at it from the perspective of the individual as well.
There are no just or wrong wars, but there are just or wrong causes. And then there are the means used to struggle for this cause, as my colleague was pointing out. And there is, according to me, always the individual's personal responsibility and morality. Morality, and not politics, have taught us during our often brutish century that sometimes it is a sin to obey. To obey orders does not discharge the individual from his moral responsibility. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission, to me, is a unique opportunity to define what was just and what was not. And in South Africa, the Commission generously gives to the individual the chance to come to terms with his doubts. And if individuals don't use this chance, I do think that they should face prosecution, as they would have to do at an international criminal tribunal.
There is wide national and international interest in the Mandela United Football Club hearings starting tomorrow. Winnie Madikizela Mandela also thrust herself into the spotlight once again this week with a stinging attack on her own party and its government. She was harshly rebuked by Sports Minister Steve Tshwete. The background to that squabble is the looming elections for a new deputy president for the ANC. But tomorrow's hearings are only about finding out the truth about past human rights violations.
I think it's important to place on record the reason we had these Section 29 inquiries is because that was the first part of the investigation process into allegations made about the involvement of Mrs. Mandela and members of the football club. These have been in statements made by victims who've come forward to complain about human rights violations. Mrs. Mandela herself, at all times, once she was subpoenaed, called for a public inquiry, and the Commission was quite pleased to accede to that request, because we also saw it as an opportunity to allow people to come forward to testify who've never actually testified in the trials that have taken place. And so one wanted to get a perspective from all the people who have knowledge of the activities of the football club. But I want to reassure people, we're not tied into any of the political processes. We haven't been influenced by any of the parties, but we think that it's very important for us to have this hearing because it is about gross human rights violations, about people who are on the other side of the struggle, not people who have been involved in state unlawful activity.
Gideon Nieuwoud was for many years a feared security policeman in the Eastern Cape. He has now applied for amnesty for the killing of the Pepco 3, Siphiwe Mthimkhulu, Topsy Mdaka, Steve Biko, and 4 victims of his car bomb at Motherwell. He also asked for amnesty for assaulting Eastern Cape community leader Mkuseli Jack. This week, the Truth Commission's Amnesty Committee decided to deny him amnesty for this assault. The committee accepted Jack's testimony and rejected Nieuwoud's version of events. In what must make Nieuwoud very nervous about all his other amnesty applications, the Amnesty Committee said this week, applicant has not made a favorable impression on us. And significantly, they state, we are not persuaded in all the circumstances that the assault was an act associated with a political motive. Before we go, a last very important matter. Victims of gross human rights violations in the period covered by the Truth Commission are entitled to reparation, but they will only qualify if they complete the correct form.
We appeal to those of you who may have suffered gross violations of human rights. Please, please, December the 14th is the cutoff date. You must, if you have not already done so, complete a statement form that you hand over to the TRC. Because if, in fact, you have been a victim and you didn't complete a statement form, then you will not be eligible for reparation. And we don't want that to happen. We have been given this task of trying to reach everyone. Help us so that we may be able to help you.
This coming week, the news will be dominated by the Mandela United Football Club hearings and the continuation of the amnesty application of the two right-wingers who killed Communist Party leader Chris Hani. Next week's special report will indeed be one not to miss. Until then, goodbye.